The stagecoach wheels kicked up dust as thick as morning fog, and Delilah Winters pressed her gloved hand against the window, watching the barren landscape of Arizona Territory roll past with a sinking feeling in her chest. She had traveled 3 weeks from Philadelphia to answer a marriage advertisement, fully expecting the man who had placed it to take one look at her scarred face and send her right back where she came from. The accident 2 years prior had left a jagged line running from her left temple down to her jaw, a permanent reminder of the factory fire that had stolen her beauty, and, she believed, any chance at a normal life. Her sister had begged her not to go, insisting that no respectable man would honor such an arrangement once he saw her in person. But Delilah had nothing left to lose in Philadelphia except pity and whispered conversations that stopped the moment she entered a room. The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of a weathered building with a sign that read Vulture City Station in faded letters. It was June of 1876, and the Arizona heat hit her like a physical blow when she stepped down from the coach, her dark blue traveling dress already feeling too heavy for the climate. Vulture City sprawled before her, a mining town that had seen better days, with false-fronted buildings lining a wide dirt street and mountains rising in the dusty distance. She clutched her single carpetbag and looked around nervously, searching for a man who matched the description in the letters she had received over the past 4 months. Miss Winters. The voice came from behind her, deep and steady, and when she turned, she found herself looking up into the most striking pair of gray eyes she had ever seen. The man was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and sun-bronzed skin that spoke of years working outdoors. He wore dusty denim pants, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face. His features were strong and masculine, with a straight nose and a firm jaw covered in several days' worth of dark stubble. "I'm Ryder Garrison." Delilah's breath caught in her throat, and instinctively she turned her head slightly to hide the scarred side of her face. "Yes, I'm Delilah Winters. Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Garrison." Her voice came out smaller than she intended, and she braced herself for the inevitable moment when he would see the full extent of her disfigurement, and his expression would change from interest to disgust, or worse, pity. But Ryder Garrison simply stepped closer, taking her carpetbag from her trembling hands with a gentleness that surprised her. The journey from Philadelphia must have been exhausting. "I have a room ready for you at the boarding house, and I thought you might like to rest before we talk about arrangements." His eyes met hers directly, and she realized with a start that he was looking at her entire face, not just the unmarred right side. There was no revulsion in his expression, no hesitation, just a quiet warmth that made her chest tighten with an unfamiliar emotion. "I appreciate that, but I think we should speak plainly, Mr. Garrison." Delilah forced herself to turn fully toward him, tilting her chin up so he could see the scar in the harsh sunlight. "I understand if you have changed your mind about the arrangement. I can work to earn enough money for passage back east. I don't expect you to honor your proposal when the reality is so different from what you might have imagined." Ryder's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those gray eyes, something that looked almost like anger, though not directed at her. "Miss Winters, I placed that advertisement because I need a wife, and you answered because you need a fresh start. I see a brave woman who traveled halfway across the country alone to build a new life. That takes more courage than most people have." He gestured toward the scar with a slight nod. "This doesn't change anything about who you are or what kind of partner you would make. If you are willing to give this town and me a chance, I would be honored to proceed as planned." Delilah felt tears prick the back of her eyes, but she blinked them away furiously. She had prepared herself for rejection, for disgust, for polite dismissal, but not for acceptance. Not for someone who looked at her as though she was worth something. "You don't have to say that just to be kind. I know what I look like." "Do you?" Ryder's voice was soft but firm. "Because I see green eyes the color of spring grass and hair like honey in sunlight. I see someone who held her head high even though she expected me to turn her away. That tells me more about your character than any physical feature ever could." He offered her his free arm. "Come on. Let me show you the boarding house, and then I will take you to dinner so we can talk properly. You can decide what you want after you have had some time to settle in." She hesitated for only a moment before placing her hand on his arm, feeling the solid strength of muscle beneath the worn fabric of his shirt. They walked down the main street of Vulture City together, and Delilah was acutely aware of the curious stares from the townspeople they passed. Ryder seemed completely unbothered by the attention, nodding politely to those who greeted him and keeping a respectful distance between them as they walked. The boarding house was a two-story structure painted white, with a wide porch and lace curtains in the windows. A plump woman with graying hair and a friendly smile met them at the door. "You must be Miss Winters. I'm Clara Henderson. Ryder has told me all about you, and I have prepared our nicest room. Come in, you poor dear. You must be exhausted from that dreadful journey." Clara Henderson bustled them inside, chattering about the weather and the town gossip with the easy friendliness of someone who genuinely enjoyed people. She led Delilah upstairs to a small but clean room with a brass bed covered in a cheerful quilt, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a window that looked out over the street. "You take all the time you need to freshen up, dear. Ryder, you come back in about 2 hours and take this young lady to supper. She needs a proper meal and some rest." Ryder set down Delilah's carpetbag and tipped his hat to her. "I'll be back at 6, if that suits you, Miss Winters." "That would be fine, thank you," Delilah managed, still feeling off balance from his easy acceptance of her. She watched him leave, his long strides carrying him quickly down the stairs and out the front door, and then she sank onto the bed and pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks. Clara reappeared with a pitcher of cool water and a plate of biscuits. "He is a good man, that Ryder Garrison. Been working his ranch outside of town for the past 5 years, building it up from nothing. He does not talk much, but when he does, people listen because he means what he says." The older woman set down the refreshments and gave Delilah a knowing look. "He was nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs this morning, getting ready to meet you. That is a good sign, dear. Means he cares about making a good impression. Mrs. Henderson, did he tell you about my situation, about why I came west?" Delilah asked quietly, touching the scar on her face self-consciously. "He mentioned you had been through some hard times back east. That's all that matters, isn't it? What is past is past." Clara patted her hand gently. "This is a territory where people come to start over. Nobody here cares much about what happened before you arrived, only what you do once you are here. You rest now and don't worry so much. Things have a way of working out." After Clara left, Delilah poured water into the basin and washed the travel dust from her face and hands, then unpinned her hair and brushed it out before repinning it in a simpler style. She changed into a lighter dress, a pale green cotton that was more suitable for the Arizona heat, and tried not to think too hard about the evening ahead. Ryder Garrison confused her in ways she hadn't expected. She had prepared herself for so many scenarios, but not for a man who looked at her with respect and saw something worth valuing. When 6 o'clock came and she heard his knock at the front door, her heart was racing. She descended the stairs carefully, her hand gripping the banister, and found him waiting in the parlor with his hat in his hands. He had cleaned up, his face freshly shaved and his hair still damp from washing, wearing a clean white shirt and a leather vest. When he saw her, something lit up in his eyes and he smiled for the first time since she had met him. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and even more handsome. "You look lovely, Miss Winters," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm. "Thank you." "You look very nice as well, Mr. Garrison." They walked to the town's only restaurant, a modest establishment called the Desert Rose that served simple but hearty food. Ryder held the door for her and guided her to a table near the window, pulling out her chair before taking his own seat. The proprietor, a Mexican woman named Rosa Martinez, brought them coffee and menus written on a small chalkboard. "The roast chicken is very good tonight," Rosa told them with a warm smile, her dark eyes twinkling as she looked between them. "And I made fresh apple pie this afternoon." They ordered the chicken, and once Rosa had left them alone, an awkward silence stretched between them. Delilah folded her hands in her lap and gathered her courage. "Mr. Garrison, I think we should discuss the practical matters. Your letters mentioned that you own a cattle ranch outside of town. What exactly would you expect from a wife?" Ryder took a sip of his coffee, his expression thoughtful. "Please call me Ryder, and may I call you Delilah?" When she nodded, he continued, "I'll be honest with you, running a ranch is hard work and it is lonely work. I've been doing it alone for 5 years now, and I've built up a decent spread with about 300 head of cattle and good water rights. But I am 30 years old, and I am tired of coming home to an empty house. I want a partner, someone to share the work and the rewards with. I want children someday, a family. I want someone to talk to at the end of the day, someone who understands what I am trying to build out here." His honesty surprised her, and she found herself responding in kind. "I'm 23 years old. Before the fire, I worked in a textile factory in Philadelphia, but after my injury, I was let go. My parents passed away from influenza when I was 19, and I was living with my older sister and her husband. They were kind enough to take me in, but I felt like a burden, especially after the accident. When I saw your advertisement in the newspaper, it seemed like an opportunity to be useful again, to have a purpose." She took a breath. "I can cook and clean and sew. I'm good with numbers. I grew up in the city, so I don't know much about ranching, but I am willing to learn." "That is all I can ask for," Ryder said quietly. "I don't expect perfection, Delilah. I just want someone who is willing to try, someone who will be honest with me and let me be honest with her." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I want you to know that I meant what I said earlier. Your scar doesn't matter to me. I've seen men lose limbs in the war, seen people scarred by disease and accidents and 100 other things. What matters is who you are inside, how you treat people, whether you keep your word. That is what makes someone worthy of respect and affection." Delilah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "You said you were in the war." "I served with the Union Army from 1863 to 1865, enlisted when I was 17, saw action in Tennessee and Georgia." His expression grew distant for a moment. "I learned a lot about what really matters in those years. Life is too short and too precious to waste on superficial concerns." Their food arrived, and they ate while trading stories about their pasts. Ryder told her about growing up in Missouri, about his parents who had died of cholera when he was 15, about working as a ranch hand for various spreads before saving enough money to buy his own land in Arizona Territory. Delilah told him about Philadelphia, about her childhood in a modest row house, about her father who had been a clerk and her mother who had taken in sewing to make ends meet. She even told him about the fire, about how she had been working late when the machinery caught fire, how she had tried to help the other workers escape and been struck by falling debris. "You saved lives that night," Ryder said when she finished, his gray eyes intent on her face. "That is what I see when I look at that scar. Not something ugly, but something that tells me you are the kind of person who puts others before herself. That is exactly the kind of person I want beside me." Delilah had to look away, overwhelmed by the intensity of his gaze and the unfamiliar feeling of being truly seen, truly valued. "I don't feel very brave most of the time. Mostly I just feel afraid." "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," Ryder said gently. "It is doing what needs to be done even when you are terrified. You came all the way out here alone, not knowing what you would find. That took real courage." They finished their meal and shared a slice of Rosa's apple pie, the conversation flowing more easily now. Delilah found herself laughing at Ryder's stories about the various disasters that had befallen him while learning to ranch. From stampedes to broken fences, to a particularly stubborn bull that had developed a habit of escaping. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard, and she realized she was actually enjoying herself, something she hadn't done in longer than she could remember. When they stepped out into the evening air, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The temperature had dropped to something more comfortable, and a light breeze stirred the dust in the street. Ryder offered her his arm again, and they walked slowly back toward the boarding house. "Delilah, I know this is sudden, and I don't want to rush you into anything," Ryder said as they walked, "but I want to be clear about my intentions. I would like to marry you if you are willing. We can do it as soon as you feel ready, or we can wait a while so you can get to know the town and decide if this is really what you want. Either way, you have a place to stay at the boarding house for as long as you need it, and I will make sure you are taken care of." She stopped walking and turned to face him, studying his expression in the fading light. There was no pressure in his eyes, no expectation, just patience and a quiet hopefulness that made her heart flutter. "You have been kinder to me in one afternoon than most people have been in the past 2 years. I want to say yes, but I am also terrified of making a mistake, of being a disappointment to you." "You couldn't disappoint me, Delilah. You have already proven you are stronger and braver than you give yourself credit for." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched her hand. His fingers were calloused from hard work, but his touch was tender. "How about this? Spend a week here in town, get to know the place and the people. Come out to the ranch so you can see what kind of life I am offering. Then decide. No pressure, no expectations. Just an honest choice." It was more than fair, more than generous, and Delilah found herself nodding. "Yes, that seems reasonable. Thank you for being so patient with me." "It is not patience when I am enjoying every minute of getting to know you," Ryder said with a small smile, and Delilah felt warmth spread through her chest. The next morning, Ryder arrived at the boarding house after breakfast with a gentle mare saddled and ready. "I thought you might like to see the ranch today if you are feeling up to it. It is about 5 miles outside of town, an easy ride." Delilah hadn't been on a horse since she was a child, but she was determined not to let fear hold her back. Ryder helped her into the saddle, his hand steadying her, and then mounted his own horse, a large bay gelding. They rode out of town at an easy pace, and Ryder pointed out various landmarks as they went, telling her about the history of Vulture City and the gold mine that had given the town its name. The landscape was harsh but beautiful in its own way, all rocky hills and scrub brush and endless sky. The heat was intense even in the morning, and Delilah was grateful for the wide-brimmed hat Ryder had brought for her. They talked as they rode, the conversation flowing easily between them, and Delilah found herself relaxing in his presence. There was something steady and reliable about Ryder Garrison, something that made her feel safe for the first time in years. The ranch appeared gradually as they rode over a rise, spreading out in a shallow valley with rocky hills on three sides and a creek running through the middle. The house was a single-story adobe structure with a covered porch and several outbuildings scattered nearby. It wasn't large or fancy, but it looked solid and well-maintained. Ryder helped her down from the horse and showed her around with obvious pride. "I built the house myself, with some help from neighbors. It has 3 bedrooms, a main room, and a kitchen. There is a good well and the creek for water and plenty of grazing land for the cattle." He led her inside, and Delilah was surprised by how clean and organized everything was. The furniture was simple but well made, and there were small touches that showed someone cared about the space. A colorful rug on the floor, curtains on the windows, books on a shelf. "You keep a tidy house," Delilah said, running her hand over the smooth surface of the wooden table. "Habit from my army days, I suppose, and I've had plenty of time to keep things in order when I am here alone." Ryder gestured toward the kitchen. "I'm a decent cook, but nothing fancy, mostly beans and beef and biscuits." Delilah moved into the kitchen, examining the cast iron stove and the shelves stocked with basic supplies. "I could do more with this. I used to bake bread every week for my sister's household, and my mother taught me how to make her recipes for stews and roasts." She turned to find Ryder watching her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "What is it? You look right here," he said simply, "like you belong in this space." She wanted to dismiss his words as flattery, but the sincerity in his eyes stopped her. "Show me the rest of the ranch." They spent the next several hours exploring the property. Ryder introduced her to his small herd of cattle grazing in the distance, showed her the barn where he kept hay and equipment, and took her to see the creek that provided water year-round. He talked about his plans for expansion, about building a larger herd and maybe bringing in some chickens for eggs, and a milk cow for butter and cheese. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Delilah found herself asking questions, imagining what it would be like to be part of building something from the ground up. They ate lunch under the shade of a cottonwood tree near the creek, sharing the sandwiches and fruit that Mrs. Henderson had packed for them. The water burbled pleasantly over the rocks, and birds called from the branches above. Delilah realized with a start that she felt content, more at peace than she had been since before the accident. "What are you thinking?" Ryder asked, lying back on his elbows and watching her with those perceptive gray eyes. "That I forgot what it feels like to hope for something," Delilah admitted. "I've spent so long just trying to survive each day that I stopped thinking about the future as something that could be good. And now I think maybe I was wrong to give up." She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the strength and kindness in his face, the way he treated her like she mattered, like her opinions and feelings were important. "You are not what I expected, Ryder Garrison." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone desperate, I suppose. Someone who needed a wife so badly he would settle for anyone, even someone like me." The old insecurity crept into her voice. "I thought you would be older, harder, someone who just wanted a housekeeper and didn't care what she looked like." "I am desperate," Ryder said quietly, sitting up to face her properly. "But not in the way you think. I'm desperate for connection, for someone to share this life with. I'm desperate for conversation and laughter and companionship. I'm desperate to build something that matters, not just a successful ranch but a real home with someone I care about." He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "When I wrote that advertisement, I told myself I just needed someone practical, someone who could help with the work. But when I saw you step off that stagecoach yesterday, looking so brave and scared at the same time, something shifted inside me. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since." Delilah's breath caught. "Ryder, I know it has only been a day and I know you need time. I just want you to know that when I look at you, I see someone I could fall in love with if you'll let me." The vulnerability in his expression, the honest emotion in his voice, broke through the last of her defenses. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I'm scared of wanting this too much, of letting myself hope and then having it taken away." "I'm scared too," Ryder admitted. "But I think the best things in life are worth being scared for." They rode back to town as the afternoon heat began to ease, and Ryder left her at the boarding house with plans to take her to church on Sunday and introduce her to more of the townspeople. Over the next few days, Delilah settled into a routine in Vulture City. Mrs. Henderson was a wealth of information about everyone in town, and she introduced Delilah to the other women with genuine warmth. There was Martha Gray, the schoolteacher, a sharp-minded woman in her 40s who immediately engaged Delilah in a discussion about literature. There was young Emily Porter, the seamstress, barely 20 years old and married to the blacksmith. And there was Dr. Ann Mitchell, one of the few female doctors in the territory, who examined Delilah's scar with professional interest and pronounced it well healed. "Whoever stitched this did a decent job, considering the circumstances," Dr. Mitchell said. "Does it cause you any pain?" "Not anymore, just sometimes it feels tight when I smile." "That is normal with scar tissue. You could massage it with oil regularly to keep it supple." The doctor's gray-blue eyes were kind behind her spectacles. "Clara tells me you are considering marrying Ryder Garrison. He is a good man, one of the best in this town. You could do far worse." Ryder came to town every day, sometimes just for an hour, sometimes for longer visits. He took her to meet the minister, Reverend Thomas Stone, an elderly gentleman with kind eyes who welcomed her warmly. He introduced her to the shopkeepers and the ranchers who came into town for supplies. He never tried to hide her or her scar, never acted ashamed or embarrassed to be seen with her. And gradually, Delilah began to realize that most of the people in Vulture City were exactly as Mrs. Henderson had said. They cared more about character than appearance, more about how she treated people than what she looked like. On Sunday, Ryder arrived at the boarding house dressed in a black suit that made him look impossibly handsome. He offered her his arm and escorted her to the small white church at the edge of town, settling beside her in one of the pews near the middle. Delilah was acutely aware of the curious glances from the other congregants, but Ryder seemed completely at ease, singing the hymns in a surprisingly pleasant baritone and listening attentively to Reverend Stone's sermon about faith and new beginnings. After the service, several people approached to introduce themselves and welcome her to town. Old Mr. Peterson, who ran the general store, invited her to stop by any time she needed supplies. Young Tom Foster, who worked as a ranch hand for various spreads, tipped his hat and stammered out a greeting. Sarah Webb, who ran the laundry, offered to show her where the best water was for washing clothes. The acceptance was overwhelming, and Delilah found tears pricking her eyes more than once. "Everyone is so kind here," she told Ryder as they walked back toward the boarding house. "Like I said, people out here care more about what you do than where you came from or what you look like. We all have our scars, some visible and some not." He paused at the bottom of the boarding house steps and turned to face her. "Delilah, it has been almost a week. Have you made a decision?" She had known this moment was coming, had been thinking about little else. In truth, she had made her decision days ago but had been too afraid to voice it. Now, looking up into Ryder's face, seeing the hope and nervousness there, she found her courage. "Yes, I want to marry you if the offer still stands." The relief and joy that flooded Ryder's expression was answer enough, but he said the words anyway. The offer stands. It will always stand. He reached out and took both of her hands in his grip warm and strong. I promise I will do everything in my power to make you happy, to give you the life you deserve. I promise the same, Delilah said, her voice thick with emotion. They were married 3 days later in the same small church, with Mrs. Henderson and Dr. Mitchell standing as witnesses. Delilah wore a simple white dress that Emily Porter had altered to fit her, and Ryder wore his black suit with a new string tie. The ceremony was short but meaningful, and when Reverend Stone pronounced them husband and wife and told Ryder he could kiss his bride, Delilah felt a flutter of nerves. But Ryder was gentle, cupping her face with both hands and pressing a soft kiss to her lips that was over almost before it began, though it left her breathless nonetheless. The townspeople had organized a small reception at the restaurant, and Rosa Martinez had prepared a feast of roasted meats and fresh vegetables and tortillas. There was music and dancing, and Ryder led Delilah through a waltz with surprising grace, his hand firm on her waist and his eyes never leaving her face. "Happy," he murmured as they swayed to the music. "Terrified," she admitted. "But yes, happy too. Good. Because I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." They left town in the late afternoon, riding out to the ranch as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. Delilah felt her nervousness increase with every mile, knowing what the evening would bring. She and Ryder had talked about many things over the past week, but they had not discussed the physical aspects of marriage, and she had no idea what to expect. When they arrived at the ranch, Ryder helped her down from her horse and then surprised her by sweeping her up into his arms. "Tradition," he explained with a grin, carrying her across the threshold of the house. He set her down gently in the main room, which looked different than it had before. There were fresh flowers on the table and someone had hung new curtains in the windows. "When did you do all this?" Delilah asked, touching the soft fabric of the curtains. "Mrs. Henderson and some of the other ladies came out yesterday to help me fix the place up. They said a bride deserves to come home to something special." Ryder moved to the kitchen and started preparing coffee. "Are you hungry? We could have some supper." Delilah realized he was as nervous as she was, and somehow that made her feel better. Coffee would be nice, and maybe we could just talk for a while. Relief flashed across his face. "I would like that." They sat at the table and talked as the light faded outside. The conversation ranging from practical matters like household routines and ranch work to deeper topics like their hopes and fears for the future. Ryder told her more about his time in the war, about the friends he had lost, and the lessons he had learned. Delilah told him about her parents, about the happy childhood she had before they died, about her dreams of having a family of her own someday. "I want children," Ryder said quietly. "I've always imagined having a house full of them, teaching my sons to ride and rope, watching my daughters grow up strong and independent. But only if you want that too. I know some women have difficult experiences with childbirth, and I would never pressure you." "I want children too," Delilah said, feeling her cheeks warm. "I used to dream about being a mother, about having a family to love and care for. I thought that dream died with the accident, but maybe it doesn't have to." "Nothing about you died with that accident," Ryder said firmly. "You are still the same person you always were, with the same hopes and dreams and capacity for love. The only difference is you have a scar that proves you survived something terrible and came out stronger on the other side." When the evening grew late, Ryder showed her to the larger of the 3 bedrooms, which he had clearly prepared for them to share. The bed was freshly made with clean sheets and a beautiful quilt, and there was a basin of water for washing. "I'll give you some time to get ready," he said quietly. "There is no rush, Delilah. We have the rest of our lives." She changed into the nightgown that Mrs. Henderson had given her as a wedding gift, her hands shaking slightly as she unpinned her hair and brushed it out. When Ryder returned, he was wearing only his pants and an undershirt, his feet bare and his hair slightly mussed. He looked younger like this, more vulnerable, and Delilah felt some of her nervousness ease. "Come here," he said softly, and when she approached, he took her hands and pulled her gently to sit beside him on the edge of the bed. "I want you to know something. I care about you, Delilah, not just because you are my wife now, but because of who you are. I know we have not known each other long, but I meant what I said at the creek. I could fall in love with you very easily if I'm not already halfway there." "I feel the same way," Delilah whispered, admitting the truth that had been growing in her heart all week. "You have shown me more kindness and respect than I ever thought I would experience again. You have made me feel valued and wanted, not in spite of my scar, but just because of who I am. I don't think I'm halfway to falling in love with you, Ryder. I think I'm already all the way there." His eyes darkened with emotion, and he cupped her face with both hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks, tracing the line of her scar with tenderness that made her want to cry. "Then let me show you how much I value you," he murmured, and kissed her again, deeper this time, with a passion that made her heart race and her body respond in ways she had never experienced. What followed was tender and sweet, Ryder taking his time to make sure she was comfortable, whispering reassurances and words of affection as they learned each other's bodies in the intimacy of the marriage bed. There was some discomfort, but mostly there was a sense of rightness, of two people coming together to create something new and beautiful. Afterward, Ryder held her close, her head resting on his chest as his fingers traced lazy patterns on her arm. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "More than all right," Delilah said honestly. "I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as Delilah settled into her new life as a rancher's wife. The work was hard and constant, but she found satisfaction in it. She learned to manage the household efficiently, baking bread and preparing meals, tending the small vegetable garden Ryder had started behind the house. She learned to milk the cow Ryder had purchased, to collect eggs from the chickens he brought home, to churn butter and make cheese. Her hands, which had been soft from city life, grew calloused and strong. Ryder taught her to ride properly, spending patient hours helping her improve her skills until she could accompany him on shorter trips around the ranch. He showed her how to handle the cattle, how to read the land for water and good grazing, how to mend fences and tend to minor injuries in the livestock. He treated her as a partner, asking for her opinion on decisions and listening seriously to her ideas. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains, talking about their day and making plans for the future. Sometimes Ryder would play the harmonica he kept tucked away in a drawer, simple melodies that filled the twilight air with something sweet and melancholy. Sometimes they would simply sit in companionable silence, hands linked, enjoying each other's presence. One evening about 6 weeks after their wedding, Ryder came in from working with the cattle to find Delilah sitting at the table with her head in her hands, tears streaming down her face. He was beside her in an instant, dropping to his knees and taking her hands in his. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "No, I'm not hurt," Delilah said, laughing through her tears. "I'm just overwhelmed. I was thinking about how different my life is now compared to 6 months ago, and I couldn't help crying. But they're happy tears, Ryder. I'm so happy it scares me sometimes." Relief flooded his face, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "You scared me half to death. I thought something terrible had happened." "Something terrible almost happened," Delilah said, pulling back to look at him. I almost let fear keep me from coming here. I almost missed out on all of this, on you, on the life we're building together. When I think about how close I came to staying in Philadelphia and never knowing what I could have. But you didn't, Ryder said firmly. You were brave enough to take the chance, and now here we are. And I promise you, Delilah, I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you never regret that decision. As summer turned to fall, the ranch thrived under their joint management. The cattle were healthy and multiplying, and Ryder was able to sell several head at good prices. With the extra money, he bought more chickens and another cow, and he started talking about expanding the house, adding another bedroom and a larger kitchen. Delilah had become friends with several of the women in town, particularly Dr. Ann Mitchell and Martha Gray. They would come out to the ranch for visits, or Delilah would ride into town to have lunch with them. These friendships meant more to her than she could express after years of isolation in Philadelphia. It was during one of these visits to town that Delilah stopped by the general store to pick up some supplies. As she was examining fabrics, trying to decide on material for new curtains, she overheard two women talking in harsh whispers nearby. "I don't understand what he sees in her," one woman said, her voice dripping with spite. "That awful scar, and her so plain besides. He could have had any number of prettier girls." "Maybe she trapped him somehow," the other woman suggested. "Probably lied about having money or connections back east." Delilah felt her face burn with humiliation and anger, the old insecurities flooding back. She abandoned her shopping and hurried out of the store, nearly colliding with Ryder, who was just coming out of the blacksmith shop across the street. "Delilah, what's wrong?" He took one look at her face and his expression hardened. "Did someone say something to you?" "It doesn't matter," she said, trying to compose herself. "Can we just go home? It matters to me." Ryder's voice was steel, and he took her hand, leading her gently to a bench outside the general store. "Tell me what happened." Reluctantly, Delilah repeated what she had overheard. As she spoke, she watched Ryder's jaw tighten and his eyes flash with anger. When she finished, he stood and walked into the general store with purposeful strides. Delilah followed, worried about what he might do. Inside, Ryder approached the two women who had been gossiping, his posture radiating controlled fury. Delilah recognized them now as wives of some of the miners, women she had seen in church but never spoken to. "Mrs. Coleman, Mrs. Walsh," Ryder said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I believe you owe my wife an apology." The two women paled, glancing at each other nervously. "We didn't mean any harm," Mrs. Coleman stammered. "We were just talking." "You were spreading vicious lies about a woman who has shown nothing but kindness to everyone in this town," Ryder said coldly. "My wife is worth 10 of either of you, and if I ever hear you speaking about her like that again, you will find yourselves unwelcome in every establishment in Vulture City. Do I make myself clear?" "That's quite enough, Ryder," Delilah said quietly, touching his arm. She turned to the two women, holding her head high despite the embarrassment burning in her chest. "I don't need your approval or your apologies. I know who I am, and I know what my husband and I have together. Your petty jealousy says more about you than it ever could about me." She walked out of the store with as much dignity as she could muster, Ryder following close behind. Once they were outside, he caught her arm gently. "I'm sorry you had to hear that. Some people are small-minded and cruel, and they lash out at anyone who seems happy because they are miserable themselves." "I know," Delilah said, taking a deep breath. "It just brought back a lot of memories of how I was treated back in Philadelphia. For a while there, I had almost forgotten that some people will always judge based on appearances. Then they're fools who don't deserve your concern." Ryder cupped her face in his hands, right there on the main street of Vulture City, and kissed her soundly. "You are beautiful and strong and capable, and I thank God every day that you chose to give me a chance. Don't let anyone make you doubt your worth, Delilah. Not ever." The incident, unpleasant as it was, seemed to solidify something in Delilah. She realized that she had been waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to ruin the happiness she had found. But Ryder's fierce defense of her, his absolute certainty in her value, helped her understand that she didn't need to fear other people's opinions anymore. She had found someone who loved her exactly as she was, and that was enough. As autumn deepened and the weather began to cool, Delilah noticed changes in her body that filled her with nervous excitement. She mentioned her suspicions to Dr. Mitchell during one of the doctor's visits to the ranch, and Anne confirmed what Delilah had hoped. "You're pregnant," the doctor said with a warm smile. "Probably about 2 months along, if I had to guess. How do you feel about it?" "Thrilled," Delilah admitted, "and terrified. What if something goes wrong? What if I can't handle childbirth? Those are normal fears, but you're healthy and strong. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't have a perfectly normal pregnancy and delivery." Anne squeezed her hand reassuringly. "When are you going to tell Ryder?" "Tonight, I think. I want to be sure before I got his hopes up." That evening, Delilah prepared Ryder's favorite meal, roast beef with potatoes and carrots and baked fresh bread. When he came in from his work, tired and dusty, he stopped and sniffed the air appreciatively. "Something smells amazing. What's the occasion?" "Can't a wife make a nice dinner for her husband without there being an occasion?" Delilah teased, but her nervous excitement must have shown on her face because Ryder's expression grew alert. "What's going on, Delilah? You look like you're about to burst with some kind of news." "Sit down and eat first, then I'll tell you." They ate dinner with Delilah barely able to taste the food. She was so anxious about Ryder's reaction. When they finished, she reached across the table and took his hands. "Ryder, how would you feel about becoming a father?" For a moment, he just stared at her, the words not seeming to register. Then understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by an expression of such pure joy that it made Delilah's heart swell. "Are you saying, are we?" "We're going to have a baby," Delilah confirmed, laughing at his stunned expression. "Dr. Mitchell confirmed it today, sometime in early May if her calculations are correct." Ryder was out of his chair and pulling her into his arms before she could take another breath, holding her so tight she could feel his heart pounding against her cheek. "A baby," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "We're going to have a baby. Delilah, I don't even know what to say. I'm so happy I could shout it from the rooftops." "Please don't," Delilah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I'd like to keep it between us for a little while longer, at least until I'm further along." "Whatever you want," Ryder said, pulling back to look at her face, his hands gentle as they framed her cheeks. "Are you happy about this? Are you scared?" "Both," she admitted, "but mostly happy. I want this so much, Ryder. I want to have your child, to give them the love and security my parents gave me." "They'll have that and more," Ryder promised. "I swear to you, Delilah, I will be the best father I can possibly be, and you're going to be an amazing mother." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter months. Delilah experienced some morning sickness in the beginning, but it passed quickly, and mostly she just felt tired and hungry all the time. Ryder was incredibly attentive, insisting she rest more and take on fewer physical tasks. He brought her little treats from town, books to read and yarn for knitting baby clothes. He talked to her growing belly every night, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the life they would have together. In February, they made the trip into town so Reverend Stone could baptize little James Peterson, the infant son of the shopkeeper and his wife. Holding the baby during the reception afterward, Delilah felt such a surge of longing and love that it brought tears to her eyes. In just a few more months, she would be holding her own child. "You're going to be wonderful at this," Martha Gray said, coming to stand beside her. The school teacher had become one of Delilah's closest friends over the past months. "That baby is lucky to have you and Ryder as parents." "I hope so," Delilah said softly. "I want to give them everything, Martha. Love and security and a sense of belonging. I want them to grow up knowing they're valued for who they are, not what they look like or what other people think of them." "They will," Martha assured her. "You and Ryder have built something special out here. Anyone can see how much you love each other, and that child will grow up surrounded by that love." As winter turned to spring, Delilah's belly grew round and prominent, and she found herself moving more slowly, tiring more easily. Ryder hired a young man named Jack Stevens to help with the heavier ranch work, so he could stay closer to the house. He doted on Delilah constantly, bringing her pillows and footstools, rubbing her aching back and swollen feet, reading aloud to her in the evenings. "You're spoiling me," Delilah protested one evening as Ryder massaged her feet while she reclined on the sofa he had recently purchased from a family leaving town. "I'm taking care of you," Ryder corrected. "There's a difference. You're carrying our child, doing the hardest work there is." "The least I can do is make you comfortable." "Have I told you today how much I love you?" Delilah asked softly. "Not since this morning," Ryder said with a grin, "but I never get tired of hearing it. I love you, Ryder Garrison, more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. You saved my life when you looked at me that first day and saw something worth valuing." "No," Ryder said seriously, moving to sit beside her and taking her hand. "You saved yourself by being brave enough to come here. I just had the good sense to recognize what a treasure you are." In early May, as the Arizona Territory began to heat up with the approaching summer, Delilah woke in the middle of the night with a cramping sensation in her belly. She lay still for a moment, wondering if it was just the baby moving, but then another cramp came, stronger this time, and she knew. She touched Ryder's shoulder gently. "Ryder, wake up, I think it's time." He was awake instantly, sitting up and lighting the lamp with hands that shook slightly. "Are you sure? How far apart are the pains?" "I don't know yet. That was only the second one." Even as she spoke, another contraction gripped her and she breathed through it, remembering Dr. Mitchell's instructions. "I'm going to ride for the doctor," Ryder said, already pulling on his clothes. "Will you be all right for a little while?" "I'll be fine. Just hurry back." He kissed her quickly and was gone, and Delilah heard the sound of his horse's hooves pounding away into the night. She got up carefully and changed into a clean nightgown, then started timing the contractions as Anne had taught her. They were about 15 minutes apart, regular and increasing in intensity. Ryder returned with Dr. Mitchell in less than an hour, the doctor's medical bag in hand and her expression calm and professional. "How are you doing, Delilah?" "The contractions are about 10 minutes apart now," Delilah reported, gripping Ryder's hand as another wave of pain washed over her. "Good, you're progressing nicely. This might take a while, though. First babies usually do." Anne examined her quickly and nodded with satisfaction. "Everything looks normal. Ryder, I need you to boil some water and get me clean towels. Then you can stay with your wife if she wants you here." "I want him here," Delilah said immediately, and Ryder squeezed her hand. The hours that followed were the longest and most intense of Delilah's life. The pain grew stronger and closer together until it felt like one continuous wave. Ryder stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement and love. Dr. Mitchell was a steady, reassuring presence, guiding Delilah through each stage of labor with competent efficiency. Finally, As dawn light began to filter through the windows, Anne said, "All right, Delilah, with the next contraction, I need you to push as hard as you can." Delilah bore down with all her strength, gripping Ryder's hand so tight she was probably hurting him, but he never complained, never flinched. Again and again she pushed, until she thought she had no strength left. Then Anne said, "One more, Delilah, just one more," and she pushed with everything she had. The baby's cry filled the room, strong and healthy, and Delilah collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face. "Is the baby all right?" "Perfect," Anne said, her voice warm with emotion. "You have a son, and he's absolutely perfect." She placed the baby on Delilah's chest, and Delilah looked down at the tiny, squirming bundle with a sense of awe so profound it stole her breath. He was perfect, with a crown of dark hair and little fists that waved in the air. Ryder leaned over them both, his face wet with tears, and touched the baby's head with one gentle finger. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "Welcome to the world. I'm your papa and I love you so much already." "What should we name him?" Delilah asked, unable to take her eyes off their son. "I was thinking about my father, if that's all right with you. His name was Robert." "Robert Garrison," Delilah said, testing the name. "It's perfect. Hello, Robert. I'm your mama and you are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Doctor." Mitchell finished her work efficiently, making sure both mother and baby were healthy and comfortable before packing up her supplies. "I'll come back tomorrow to check on you both. Get some rest, Delilah. You did beautifully." After Anne left, Ryder climbed carefully into bed beside Delilah and their son, his arm around her shoulders as they both gazed at the baby. "I can't believe he's really here," Ryder said softly. "I can't believe we made something this perfect." "He has your nose," Delilah said with a tired smile. "And your eyes, I think. They might change color, but right now they look green." Ryder kissed her forehead gently. "Thank you for this gift, Delilah. Thank you for being brave enough to come here, for giving me a chance, for building this life with me. I love you more than words can express." "I love you too," Delilah whispered. "You and Robert are my whole world now." The next few weeks were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Robert was a good baby, healthy and alert, but he demanded constant attention. Delilah was grateful for Ryder's help, for the way he took on even more of the household tasks and spent hours walking the floor with Robert when the baby was fussy. They took turns getting up for nighttime feedings, and Ryder proved to be a natural father, completely unafraid of the tiny infant. Mrs. Henderson and several other women from town came to visit, bringing food and gifts and advice. They cooed over Robert and praised Delilah's mothering skills, and Delilah felt herself becoming even more integrated into the community. Even Mrs. Coleman and Mrs. Walsh, the women who had gossiped about her, sent a baby quilt with their apologies for their past behavior. As spring turned to summer and Robert grew from a tiny newborn into a plump, smiling baby, life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Delilah learned to manage the household tasks with a baby on her hip or sleeping in a basket nearby. Ryder continued to build up the ranch, and with the help of young Jack Stevens, he was able to increase the herd significantly. One evening in late July, when Robert was almost 3 months old, Delilah and Ryder sat on the porch watching the sunset while their son slept peacefully in Ryder's arms. The baby had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, and he was the most precious thing in both their worlds. "I was thinking," Ryder said quietly, not wanting to wake the baby, "maybe we should think about expanding the house sooner rather than later. If we're going to have more children, we'll need the space." "More children," Delilah said with a laugh. "Robert is barely 3 months old." "I know, but I'm just planning ahead. I want a big family, remember, at least 3 or 4 children, maybe more." He grinned at her. "Unless you have objections." "No objections," Delilah said softly, leaning against his shoulder. "I want that too. I want our children to grow up with siblings, with love and laughter filling this house." "Then we'll make it happen," Ryder promised. "Whatever you want, whatever will make you happy." "I'm already happy," Delilah said. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible. A year ago I was alone and hopeless in Philadelphia, convinced my life was over. Now I have a husband I love more than anything, a beautiful son, a home, friends, a purpose. You gave me all of that, Ryder." "No," Ryder said firmly, shifting the baby carefully so he could put his arm around his wife. "You gave yourself all of that by being brave enough to take a chance. I just had the incredible luck to be the one you chose to take that chance with." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue, and stars began to appear one by one. Inside the house, the life they had built together waited for them, warm and secure. Outside, the ranch stretched away into the darkness, a testament to their hard work and dedication. And in Ryder's arms, their son slept peacefully, unaware of how much love surrounded him. The seasons turned one after another, and the Garrison family grew and thrived. When Robert was 2 years old, Delilah gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, a tiny, dark-haired girl with her father's gray eyes. 2 years after that came another son, Daniel, who had his mother's honey-colored hair and a mischievous smile from the moment he was born. Ryder expanded the house as promised, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen and parlor. The ranch prospered under his management, growing to over 1,000 head of cattle and becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. But despite their financial success, Ryder and Delilah never lost sight of what truly mattered. They raised their children with love and discipline, teaching them the value of hard work and honesty and kindness to others. Delilah became known throughout Vulture City as someone who could be counted on in times of trouble. She helped nurse the sick during an outbreak of fever, organized food drives for families struggling with hard times, and taught reading to children whose parents couldn't afford to send them to school. Her scar, once a source of shame and insecurity, became just another part of who she was, unremarkable to those who knew her for her character and actions. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ryder surprised Delilah with a trip to San Francisco, arranging for Mrs. Henderson to watch the children for 2 weeks. They stayed in a fancy hotel, attended the theater, and ate in restaurants that Delilah had only read about in magazines. But the best part of the trip was simply spending time together, remembering who they had been when they first met and marveling at how far they had come. "You remember that first day?" Ryder asked as they walked along the waterfront, watching ships come and go in the harbor. "When you stepped off the stagecoach looking like you expected me to send you away?" "I remember," Delilah said, slipping her hand into his. "I was so scared and so certain you would be disappointed. I had no idea that I was about to meet the man who would change my entire life." "I knew the moment I saw you that you were special," Ryder said. "Something about the way you held yourself, the courage in your eyes even though you were terrified. I thought, this is a woman worth knowing, worth keeping." "You saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself," Delilah said softly. "You looked past the scar and saw me, the real me. That was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." "You gave me a greater gift," Ryder countered. "You gave me love, partnership, children, a home that feels complete. You took a lonely rancher with nothing but dreams and helped me build a life worth living." They returned to Vulture City after 2 wonderful weeks, eager to see their children and get back to the rhythm of ranch life. Robert, now 12 years old, had grown tall and strong, already helping his father with the more demanding ranch work. Sarah, at 10, was learning to help her mother with the household tasks and showed a real talent for cooking. And 8-year-old Daniel was the wild one, always getting into mischief, but with a heart of gold that made it impossible to stay angry at him for long. The years continued to pass, marked by small triumphs and occasional challenges. There were droughts that tested their water management skills, harsh winters that took a toll on the cattle, and the constant work required to maintain a successful ranch. But through it all, Ryder and Delilah faced every challenge together, their love and partnership growing stronger with each passing year. When Robert turned 18, he announced his intention to stay on the ranch and help his father rather than seeking opportunities elsewhere. Ryder couldn't have been prouder, and together they began planning for the day when Robert would take over the operation. Sarah, at 16, had caught the eye of the new school teacher who had moved to town, a young man named Peter Davis who treated her with respect and genuine affection. Daniel, at 14, was still figuring out what he wanted from life, but he had his mother's compassionate heart and his father's work ethic. One evening in the spring of 1896, 20 years after Delilah had first arrived in Vulture City, she and Ryder sat on their porch watching yet another sunset paint the Arizona sky in brilliant colors. Their children were inside, Sarah helping Daniel with his mathematics while Robert worked on the ranch accounts. At 43 and 50 years old, respectively, Ryder and Delilah had weathered 2 decades of marriage with grace and growing love. "You ever regret it?" Delilah asked suddenly. "Marrying a scarred woman from Philadelphia instead of someone prettier, someone more suitable?" Ryder turned to look at her, his gray eyes still as sharp and perceptive as they had been the day they met. "How can you even ask that after all these years?" "Delilah, you are the best decision I ever made. You're beautiful inside and out. That scar isn't something I see as a flaw. It's part of your story, part of what made you who you are." "I know," Delilah said with a smile. "I guess sometimes I still can't believe how lucky I am. That day I stepped off the stagecoach, I was expecting rejection, expecting disappointment. Instead, I found a cowboy who saw my worth from the very first moment, who looked past my fears and insecurities and saw someone worth loving. You changed my life, Ryder Garrison." "We changed each other's lives," Ryder corrected, pulling her close and kissing the top of her head. "We built this life together, one day at a time, one decision at a time, and I wouldn't change a single moment of it. Not even the time Daniel let all the chickens loose and we spent 3 days trying to catch them," Delilah asked with a laugh. "Well, maybe I would change that moment," Ryder conceded with a grin, "but everything else is perfect." They sat together as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, comfortable in their silence and in each other's presence. Inside the house, they could hear their children laughing at something Daniel had said, the sound of family and home and love that they had created together. The ranch stretched away into the darkness around them, a testament to their hard work and dedication, but also to the partnership that had made it all possible. Delilah thought about the young woman she had been 20 years ago, broken and hopeless, convinced her life was over. She thought about the leap of faith she had taken in answering that advertisement, in traveling across the country to marry a stranger. And she thought about Ryder, the man who had looked at her with respect and kindness from the very first moment, who had seen past her scars to the person she truly was. "I love you," she whispered, the words as true and necessary as breathing. "I love you too," Ryder replied, his voice warm with emotion. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." As they sat together under the vast Arizona sky, Surrounded by the life they had built and the family they had created, Delilah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She had come west expecting rejection, but she had found something infinitely more precious. She had found a love that valued her for who she truly was, a partner who saw her worth even when she couldn't see it herself, and a life filled with purpose and meaning and joy. The journey from that first terrifying day in Vulture City to this moment of perfect contentment had been long and sometimes difficult, but every challenge had been worth it. Every fear she had overcome, every insecurity she had conquered, every risk she had taken had led her here to this porch, to this man, to this beautiful life. And as Ryder squeezed her hand gently and they watched the last light fade from the sky, Delilah sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the courage that had brought her west, for the cowboy who had seen her worth from the very first moment, and for the love that had transformed them both from two lonely people into a family that would endure for generations to come. The story of how they met would be told to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren in years to come, a tale of bravery and acceptance and love conquering fear. But for now, it was simply their story, still being written one day at a time, one sunset at a time, one loving moment at a time. And it was, in every way that mattered, a story with the happiest of endings.